She mopped the floors for 15 years. No one said thank you. No one asked her name. But today, she walked into the boardroom and fired the CEO. Turns out, the janitor owned everything. She arrived before the sun, her shoes silent against the polished marble floor. No one noticed her slipping through the revolving glass doors, just another figure in a faded uniform with a cart of tools and rags. She moved like a ghost, weaving through the early silence of a building that would soon echo with the noise of power, ego, and ambition. The towering office was a monument to success: chrome elevators, glass-walled conference rooms, modern art too expensive to touch. Yet for all its gloss, it remained cold, heartless even. She mopped the same floor she'd walked for 15 years. Every inch of the place was familiar: the creak in the third boardroom chair, the buzzing light on the 21st floor, the coffee stain beneath the CFO's desk. Colleagues walked by her like she didn't exist. Executives barely turned their heads. Some left their trash deliberately for her to pick up, as if her presence excused their manners. One muttered under his breath, "She's still here?" Another laughed and said, "She probably sleeps in the supply closet." No one asked her name. She kept her head down, her hands busy, but her ears open. Conversations weren't guarded around her. She overheard everything: backroom deals, secret layoffs, whispered betrayals disguised as strategy. She never interrupted, never reacted. She just listened. And at night, when the building emptied out and only the hum of the HVAC remained, she'd write in a small leather notebook. Names, dates, snippets. Nothing loud, just truth, recorded. The CEO was the loudest of them all, a man who wore arrogance like a tailored suit. To him, kindness was weakness. Power meant stepping on those who couldn't fight back. He barked orders at assistants, ignored janitors, and dismissed anyone without a title or a corner office. When she crossed his path, he didn't see her. Not really. Sometimes he scowled. Once, he nearly tripped over her mop bucket and shouted, "Watch where you leave your junk." She nodded silently and moved the bucket aside. But she never forgot. One night, as the city glowed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, she stood in front of a door she'd passed 1,000 times, the executive suite. It was locked. Of course it was, reserved only for the highest in the hierarchy. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, she reached into her pocket, touched something, and smiled. A soft, knowing smile. No one saw. No one ever looked. She turned, pushed her cart, and walked away. No one knew the janitor had keys to more than just the cleaning closets. The CEO ruled with a steel grip and a sharpened smile. Departments disappeared overnight. Good people were let go with nothing more than an email. The only thing that mattered to him was the bottom line: stock charts, investor calls, headlines. He cut costs, replaced teams with cheaper labor, and squeezed profits from every corner of the company. Morale plummeted. Whispers filled the halls. "He's gutting us. Doesn't care who he steps on." But no one dared speak too loudly. Fear was part of the culture now. And yet, through it all, she moved quietly, still unseen, still overlooked. But she saw everything. Every coffee-stained memo thrown in a recycling bin, every late-night argument between board members behind closed doors, every pattern of who stayed late, who got promoted, and who vanished without a trace. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was studying. At night, she'd drift into departments no longer used, offices half-packed after sudden firings, and break rooms where desperate conversations unfolded between sips of cheap coffee. One night, a report sat open on a forgotten printer. Financial statements. But something was off. Too many rounded numbers, too few real expenses. A confidential project name at the top. It wasn't just shady, it was illegal. She didn't panic. She didn't hesitate. She took her phone from her apron pocket, photographed every page in silence, then slid it all neatly back into place. Nothing disturbed. No trace left. Later, she walked down the dim hallway and paused as flickering lights cast long shadows. A memory flickered too. A courtroom, years ago. A young woman speaking in front of men who didn't believe she belonged there. Terms like capital structure, shell accounts, and hostile takeover flowed from her lips with ease. They'd laughed, then dismissed her. But the memory remained sharp, alive behind her eyes. Days later, a junior employee spotted her near the CFO's desk, eyes on a glowing screen. His laptop had been left unlocked, a careless mistake. She scanned quickly, then closed it. The employee watched, puzzled. What janitor knew how to navigate financial dashboards like that? But when she looked up and smiled, he said nothing. Soon, rumors began to spread. A few thought an internal investigation was underway. "Someone's watching the CEO," they whispered. But no one guessed it was her. She still carried her mop, still wore that faded uniform, still nodded quietly as people passed her by. Everything he built was about to collapse, and the janitor already knew when and how. The boardroom shimmered with tension. The CEO stood tall, his voice echoing off the glass walls as he paced in front of the screen. Charts soared, graphs impressed, and projections danced with promise. Today was his moment. A high-profile acquisition was about to be announced, risky, aggressive, and exactly the kind of headline he craved. Cameras were waiting. Investors were watching. His suit was tailored, his speech rehearsed. He smirked between slides, confident no one could touch him. But elsewhere in the building, something unusual was happening. She moved through the corridors without her cart, her gloves, or her mop. Gone was the uniform. In its place, a sleek black suit, crisp and commanding. Her steps were deliberate, her posture upright, her eyes steady. Staff paused, confused. Some whispered. Security watched from their desks, brows furrowed. When she approached the elevator reserved for executives, a guard stepped forward, until she flashed a card. Not a visitor pass, not a janitorial badge. A high-level ID with clearance no one knew she had. The scanner beeped. The doors opened. Inside the boardroom, the CEO's voice grew louder, more boastful. He spoke of vision, disruption, dominance. The executives clapped politely. Some looked uneasy, but no one interrupted. He didn't see the door open behind him, but they did. Their faces shifted. Confusion, then disbelief. She stepped in without a word, no longer invisible. Her heels echoed like a gavel. She walked to the table and placed a thick folder in the center. No one moved. The CEO turned, and for a brief moment, his confident mask cracked. "What is she doing here?" someone whispered. She spoke with calm authority. "You've spent years pretending this company belonged to you," she said, "but it never did." One by one, she pulled out the documents. Legal filings, proof of silent ownership, the original charter bearing her signature, evidence of fraud buried in recent deals. Whispers turned to gasps. The CEO laughed, nervous, dismissive, until she placed the final page before him. A vote. Unanimous. The board had spoken. Those who remembered her knew her worth. Those who never saw her never mattered. She looked at him and said only, "You're done." He stood frozen, grasping for words, for power, for control. But it was gone. He built an empire on lies, but forgot whose empire it truly was. Security walked him out in silence, his once commanding presence reduced to nothing. He didn't look back. Phones stayed down. No one applauded. Just stunned faces watching the fall of a man who thought he was untouchable. He had ruled with fear. But now fear was gone, replaced by something stronger, respect and awe for the woman he never saw coming. She stood in the boardroom, steady and composed, while whispers spread like wildfire through the building. Some employees cried, not out of sadness, but out of quiet realization. They'd passed her in the halls for years, barely nodding, and now they knew. She had watched, endured, and remembered. Behind her calm expression was a past they'd never imagined. Years ago, she had stood in that same boardroom, young, brilliant, ambitious. But they hadn't seen value in someone who was black, female, and unconnected. They erased her name from the founding documents, cast her out with empty promises. So she disappeared. Not out of defeat, but strategy. She would return, not with vengeance, but vision. And now, that vision was reality. She didn't just reclaim power, she restructured it. Toxic leaders were dismissed, whispers of fear replaced by conversations of hope. The interns who had offered her smiles, the assistants who shared warm coffee and kind words, the janitors who worked beside her without judgment. They stayed. They rose. The new leadership was chosen not by resumes, but by character. Innovation was no longer a buzzword. It was the new foundation. Diversity wasn't a campaign. It was the company's core. She walked those same halls again, but the air had changed. Heads turned with respect. People stepped aside not out of duty, but admiration. She paused by her old supply closet, now emptied and repainted. Where her mop once rested, a glass case now held it, mounted with a plaque. Honor in silence. Power in patience. At a press conference, she spoke only once. Greatness isn't in what you flaunt. It's in what you build, and who you lift while building it. Then she turned. No cameras needed, no applause desired. She had cleaned floors, but she also cleaned house.